In the late summer of 1944, American ground forces in Europe advanced eastward across France, following the breakout from Normandy. German armored forces remained a persistent threat. Infantry units frequently operated beyond the protection of U.S. tanks in expanding front lines. Panzer IVs, Panther tanks, and anti-tank guns, such as the 75mm Pak 40, inflicted heavy casualties when infantry lacked cover. During this stage of the campaign, sections of the U.S. Army's 1st and 3rd Armies encountered fortified German defensive belts along the Siegfried Line. The terrain of hedgerows, villages, and fields forced rifle companies into exposed movement. German forces, skilled in camouflaging anti-tank guns and employing Panzerfausts in close-range ambushes, designed defensive positions to destroy approaching infantry support vehicles before they could provide covering fire. Rifle squads relied heavily on half-tracks, jeeps, and engineer vehicles to bring ammunition, communications gear, and medical supplies forward. These light vehicles were not designed to withstand anti-tank fire. German high-velocity guns could penetrate standard U.S. armor at long range. The risk of sudden contact with German armor produced a constant urgency to find additional protection. Improvised solutions emerged rapidly across many units. Sandbags were stacked on half-tracks. Steel plates from destroyed tanks or farm buildings were cut apart and welded to hulls. Soldiers filled spare fuel cans with sand and strapped them to doors. Some commanders discouraged these alterations due to weight and maintenance issues. Others allowed them, prioritizing crew survival over doctrine. Within the 4th Infantry Division operating near the German border, a rifle company, assigned to advance through a network of small villages, faced frequent armored counterattacks. One of its junior leaders, a U.S. Army corporal overseeing a small fire support jeep crew, recognized the vulnerability of his lightly protected vehicle. The jeep carried equipment such as a radio set and bazookas for anti-armor engagement. German forces targeted these vehicles aggressively. The corporal acquired steel sheets left behind by a destroyed German supply truck. He ordered the crew to mount the plates to the jeep's sides and front, using tools taken from an engineer depot. The armor was uneven and crudely applied. Welds were irregular. The additional weight strained the engine. Officers questioned the decision, but the vehicle remained operational. In September 1944, the company advanced toward a village that held a strategic crossroads controlling movement toward the interior of Germany. Intelligence reports indicated the presence of German rearguard units equipped with anti-tank guns positioned to delay the American approach. The corporal's jeep led a section responsible for establishing radio communication with battalion headquarters. The unit encountered artillery fire as it approached the outskirts. Riflemen took cover along the roadside while engineers cleared mines. The jeep remained forward to maintain signal lines. German observation posts directed indirect fire to slow the movement. The corporal kept the vehicle behind small rises in terrain to reduce exposure. When artillery fire subsided, German anti-tank guns opened fire on vehicles attempting to enter the village. The first hit destroyed a half-track carrying a machine gun squad. Smoke and debris obscured the road. Infantry dispersed into ditches and advanced cautiously. The corporal repositioned to provide communication from a concealed orchard. From this location, the antenna remained operational while the crew transmitted coordinates of observed fire. The jeep was struck by shrapnel fragments from near misses. The improvised armor prevented injury to the crew. As the advance continued, the company sought to flank the German defense by moving through a row of houses. The corporal's jeep supported the maneuver by transporting ammunition to forward squads. When German Panzerfaust teams attempted to attack from a barn, American riflemen suppressed the threat. The jeep then accelerated across a narrow street under fire. A concealed Pak 40 anti-tank gun fired directly at the vehicle. The round penetrated the steel plate but lost much of its velocity passing through the improvised armor. The shell fragmented inside, but the reduced energy minimized crew injuries. The driver sustained minor wounds, but the vehicle continued moving and reached cover. The event demonstrated that even crude protection could alter the outcome of anti-tank engagements. The corporal reinforced the armor after the battle by adding sandbags between the steel sheets and the vehicle body. The layered structure provided improved ballistic resistance. Officers documented the success informally, noting that improvised modifications contributed to mission continuity and crew survival. In October, the division approached the Hürtgen Forest, a heavily defended region along the German border. Dense woodland, mined pathways, and poor visibility favored German defensive tactics. Infantry suffered high casualties from artillery and concealed anti-tank weapons firing down narrow forest roads. The corporal's jeep now served regularly as a forward resupply and communication vehicle. The armor was expanded further using salvaged plate from wrecked vehicles, including captured German equipment. The canopy and windshield were reinforced. Bullet deflectors were installed near the driver's position. The improvised armor increased weight significantly, reducing mobility in difficult terrain. However, the risk of immobilization by enemy fire was considered greater than the risk of mechanical strain. Crew discipline emphasized maintaining engine performance through regular cooling breaks and field repairs. During operations near Schmidt, German forces counterattacked U.S. elements with armor support from Panther tanks and Sturmgeschütz assault guns. Anti-tank guns engaged American armor from camouflage forest clearings. Riflemen advancing on foot were pinned by machine gun and artillery fire. Supply vehicles remained critical to sustaining the offensive. The corporal's jeep supported a temporary command post by delivering wire reels and radio batteries. Under heavy fire, the vehicle crossed exposed portions of a road targeted by German gunners. A second armor-piercing round struck the vehicle's side. The round failed to penetrate fully due to increasing layers of steel and sandbags. Fragments caused superficial damage and minor wounds, but did not disable the jeep. The crew completed the supply run and evacuated 2 wounded soldiers. Battalion command cited the jeep's survival as evidence that improvised armor had tactical value. Word of the vehicle spread through the battalion. Other soldiers requested similar modifications. Engineers provided limited assistance when welding equipment was available. In November, rainfall and mud slowed operations. German defenses remained determined. Infantry suffered shortages of ammunition near front positions. The corporal's jeep continued to operate near the front line, transporting essential equipment along routes at constant risk of anti-tank fire. The crew adjusted tactics by traveling at irregular speeds, using terrain features for cover and avoiding predictable paths. The German defenders increasingly relied on Panzerfaust teams positioned near roads and intersections. These weapons were highly effective at short range, even against medium tanks. The improvised armor on the jeep offered little protection against direct Panzerfaust hits, but it reduced vulnerability to small arms and artillery fragments that frequently inflicted damage in forward areas. During an advance toward the border village of Großhau, the corporal coordinated with a neighboring company to deliver ammunition during an enemy artillery barrage. The armored jeep utilized a shallow ditch to reduce visibility. German infantry observed the movement and attempted to engage with rifles and machine guns. The improvised armor deflected multiple rounds. Upon reaching the ammunition collection point, the crew distributed rifle and machine gun cartridges. A German sniper attempted to disable the driver through the windshield, but the armored reinforcement prevented penetration. The sniper was later neutralized by U.S. riflemen. The corporal continued adjusting the armor configuration between missions. He analyzed each strike to improve coverage of vulnerable areas. Indirect fire caused minor structural damage, but the accumulative protective effect increased over time. American doctrine emphasized mobility, but soldiers in the field prioritized survival in situations where movement offered limited protection. The jeep became a unique example of armor adaptation responding to evolving battlefield conditions. As winter conditions set in, the division prepared for renewed German resistance. Rumors of enemy armor concentration in the Ardennes circulated through command channels. Units fortified their vehicles despite fuel and supply constraints. The improvised armored jeep now carried radio equipment, ammunition, medical supplies, and occasionally wounded personnel. The corporal's modifications continued without formal approval, but results justified autonomy. German anti-tank guns remained active along forest edges. Infantry coordination depended on the jeep's communication capabilities. The vehicle entered December with visible scars from multiple engagements. Weld lines, patched armor, and sandbag mounts demonstrated continuous adaptation. The crew developed confidence in their protection, despite its improvised origins. The battalion noted the jeep's role in maintaining frontline communications, emphasizing that the vehicle had survived firepower that destroyed multiple lightly armored transports in the same sector. The case became a small but meaningful example of soldier-led innovation during the campaign toward Germany. In December 1944, German forces launched a major counteroffensive in the Ardennes region of Belgium and Luxembourg. The operation aimed to split Allied armies, capture Antwerp, and force a negotiated settlement in the west. The surprise attack placed significant pressure on American infantry holding thin defensive sectors. Units lacking armored support faced sudden engagements with German panzers and anti-tank weapons in conditions of snow, fog, and limited mobility. The Corporal's battalion, positioned near the northern sector of the forest, received orders to assist with reinforcement movements. Command posts shifted frequently as units withdrew to secondary defensive lines. Reliable communication became critical. The Corporal's armored jeep maintained radio contact between forward companies and battalion headquarters during periods of disrupted infrastructure. Roads through the Ardennes were narrow, icy, and frequently blocked by abandoned vehicles. The German offensive generated chaotic traffic conditions as support elements repositioned under fire. The Corporal's crew navigated damaged routes using the improvised armor to sustain mobility in exposed situations. German Panthers and anti-tank guns established ambushes along roadsides, targeting American transport columns. Infantry attempted to bypass these ambush sites by advancing through forests. The jeep transported ammunition and demolition equipment to engineer teams tasked with blocking German movement. Machine gun fire struck the vehicle multiple times, with rounds deflecting off reinforced steel. In one engagement, German Panzer Grenadiers used 20mm autocannon fire to target supply vehicles. The jeep's armor absorbed hits that would have penetrated standard thin-sheet metal. The crew reported that welded German steel plate displayed higher resistance than U.S. equipment. Salvaged armor combining both types increased survivability. Visibility remained poor throughout the early phase of the offensive. German forces exploited fog to advance undetected. When a Panther tank appeared unexpectedly along a forest road, the Corporal's jeep narrowly avoided direct fire by maneuvering behind trees. Fragments of a high-explosive round cracked one of the armored plates, but did not penetrate. The crew repositioned to cover while relay transmissions continued. The battalion conducted delaying actions to slow the German advance. The armored jeep allowed officers to maintain forward presence longer than typical support vehicles. The Corporal improvised additional armor using frozen sandbags, which provided limited ballistic mitigation but improved splinter protection against indirect fire. As the German offensive pushed westward, rear logistical movements intensified. The Corporal's jeep transported rations and medical supplies when other assets were unavailable. Artillery operated by German forces disrupted evacuation routes. The jeep evacuated several wounded soldiers under fire, with armor preventing further casualties. During a supply shuttle near a village crossroads, a German Pak-40 fired on the road position. The first shot destroyed a U.S. truck. Infantry took cover in shallow depressions. The Corporal accelerated across the impact zone to deliver essential ammunition to a pinned squad firing at enemy armor. A second armor-piercing round struck the jeep's frontal plate. The impact deformed the steel, but did not penetrate fully. The crew completed the delivery and withdrew as American artillery suppressed the gun position. The vehicle's performance reinforced its necessity. Commanders allowed continued modifications without administrative oversight. The Corporal used maintenance periods to increase armor thickness where previous hits indicated vulnerability. This iterative process improved effectiveness with each engagement. By late December, U.S. armored divisions counterattacked the German flanks. The infantry, including the Corporal's division, advanced through contested villages. German garrisons left behind small groups with anti-tank weapons, attempting to delay American cleansing operations. These threats targeted support vehicles moving behind advancing riflemen. The Corporal's jeep accompanied a platoon clearinghouses used as observation posts. Panzerfaust teams fired from concealed basement positions. The crew used the armored windshield plate to observe movement and communicate target coordinates. The armor sustained additional minor damage from small-caliber weapons. As Allied forces regained momentum, the battalion transitioned to offensive tactics in January 1945. Heavy snow continued to impair visibility, and German artillery delayed advances. The Corporal's jeep was assigned to a forward observer section supporting artillery coordination. The armor protected the observer and radio from scattered fire during adjustment missions. German machine guns frequently engaged the vehicle as it repositioned. One of the most significant tests occurred near a strategic ridgeline east of the initial German breakout. Anti-tank guns positioned in defilade targeted vehicles cresting the ridge. The corporal navigated a low approach through trees to reduce silhouette. Despite precautions, a delayed fuse high-explosive round detonated near the Jeep, sending fragments into the side panels. The layered steel and sandbags absorbed the blast to a degree that prevented penetration into critical components. Later that day, the Jeep transported wire spools for communication setup. German mortar fire bracketed the route. The corporal accelerated to escape impact zones. Shrapnel struck the rear armor and damaged one weld seam. The crew conducted a field reinforcement using scrap iron and chain segments. After the German offensive failed, U.S. forces resumed full-scale operations toward the Rhine River. The corporal's division advanced into Germany's western defenses. The enemy continued to employ anti-tank assets aggressively, concentrating fire against vehicles providing supply and communication. The corporal's Jeep accompanied a rifle company through defensive belts featuring dragon's teeth, barbed wire, and machine gun strongpoints. Engineer units cleared paths. German artillery targeted choke points. The improvised armor provided intermittent cover when dismounting soldiers used the vehicle as a shield. The Jeep supported night movement using blackout lights and terrain masking. German artillery and mortars fired illumination rounds to expose advancing forces. Machine gun fire struck the vehicle's sides and hood. The armor deflected rounds with minor ricochet hazards. The crew maintained strict discipline in keeping body positions behind armor surfaces. In early February 1945, during operations east of the Ruhr River, the Jeep encountered entrenched anti-tank guns firing along road networks. Riflemen advanced to flank these positions. The corporal directed radio communications to request suppressive artillery fire. The Jeep's armor protected the radio operator while adjusting fire under threat. The vehicle also supported recovery of abandoned equipment. German sabotage teams placed explosive charges on retreat paths. The Jeep transported demolition specialists under fire to neutralize booby traps. The armor offered improved protection during short halts. German forces increasingly relied on Panzerfaust ambushes in urban and semi-urban environments. In these conditions, the Jeep avoided close-quarter exposure, where the armor provided minimal protection. Instead, it supported dismounted infantry with communications and logistics from set positions behind obstacles. Several engagements involved German 20mm anti-aircraft guns used in a ground role against infantry. These weapons possessed high penetration capability at close range. During one incident, two 20mm rounds caused visible deformation of an armored panel, but failed to disable the engine. The crew applied reinforcing straps across weak sections of the panel afterward. The Jeep now exhibited a distinct appearance, with overlapping armor plates of varying shapes and origins. Crews from neighboring units referred to it informally as a steel turtle, based on its piecemeal protection. The corporal acknowledged reduced speed but emphasized increased survivability as essential for communication continuity. During an approach to a river crossing point, the Jeep accompanied a reconnaissance patrol. German anti-tank guns fired from concealed positions across the river. Though the Jeep did not advance into direct line of fire, ricochets from tank shells struck the front bumper armor. The damage was superficial but demonstrated continuous risk in frontline environments. The corporal kept a log of all armor strikes, including entry locations and outcomes. This record assisted in optimizing armor distribution. Observations indicated that layered combinations of steel plate and sandbags provided superior performance against fragmentation and small-caliber threats. Larger-caliber anti-tank rounds continued to pose lethal risk, but the armor reduced crew exposure in partial penetrations. Supply shortages limited further improvements. The Jeep carried spare tires, tow chains, and fuel cans mounted externally to maximize internal space for essential equipment. The armor modifications added considerable weight, causing increased fuel consumption and mechanical wear. The crew dedicated additional maintenance time to sustain mobility. By March 1945, U.S. forces approached the Rhine River near Remagen. The unexpected capture of the Ludendorff Bridge enabled rapid establishment of a bridgehead. Communications units, including the corporal's Jeep crew, supported coordination of the river crossing. The armor protected vital communication assets as German artillery targeted the bridge approaches extensively. High-explosive shells landed near the Jeep during multiple supply runs along the congested approach roads. Fragments struck both sides and the rear structure. The vehicle sustained external damage, but critical systems remained operational. Medical evacuation operations were conducted under continuous shelling, with the Jeep assisting when ambulances encountered delays. German defenders attempted to destroy the bridge with artillery and sabotage. Communication assets were essential for directing counter-battery fire and coordinating engineer repairs. The Jeep's armored cab protected the radio from splinters and debris during these operations. Once the bridgehead was secure, American forces expanded eastward. Enemy anti-tank resistance decreased gradually as German armored reserves diminished. However, scattered pockets of resistance continued to employ effective tactics using anti-tank rifles, Panzerfausts, and occasionally captured Allied weapons. In small towns and industrial complexes, the Jeep assisted infantry by transporting ammunition into confined streets where trucks could not maneuver. The improvised armor provided deflective capability against sniper fire targeting narrow angles. The crew supplemented protection by mounting additional sandbags inside the door panels. During one operation, the Jeep positioned itself behind a disabled Sherman tank to facilitate communication between tank crews and infantry. A German anti-tank team attempted to fire from a second-story window. The tank's coaxial machine gun neutralized the threat. The Jeep sustained no damage in this instance, but remained within lethal range throughout the engagement. As the battalion advanced farther into Germany, the corporal continued recording each encounter. His notes emphasized that improvised armor served as a dynamic response to battlefield threats not fully addressed by standard equipment. The campaign highlighted the limitations of lightly protected transport vehicles in modern warfare. The corporal's efforts demonstrated that field modifications, even without formal design, could sustain operational capability and reduce casualties. As April approached, the remaining German forces continued to resist primarily through isolated strongpoints and local counterattacks. The Jeep supported psychological operations teams distributing surrender instructions to enemy soldiers, cut off from command. The improvised armor, now heavily dented and patched, remained functional. The crew maintained the vehicle despite increasing signs of mechanical fatigue. Engine overheating occurred more frequently, but was mitigated through controlled driving patterns and stopping intervals. Near the end of the war in Europe, U.S. forces faced reduced but persistent threats from concealed anti-tank weapons. The corporal's Jeep continued tasks involving resupply, communication relay, and transport of wounded personnel until German resistance collapsed entirely in May 1945. The corporal's initiative, begun as a response to immediate vulnerability, evolved into sustained frontline utility across multiple campaigns. The armored Jeep survived engagements that destroyed numerous similar vehicles lacking modification. By April 1945, German defenses across central Germany were increasingly fragmented. American forces advanced into industrial regions and towns previously critical to German logistics. Remaining enemy anti-tank weapons continued to inflict losses when units failed to maintain caution, especially in built-up areas where ambush positions remained abundant. The corporal's division conducted clearance operations around the Ruhr. The Jeep, heavily modified with armor from multiple engagements, continued serving as a mobile communications asset. The vehicle transported field telephone wire to maintain connectivity with advancing companies. German small arms remained common, and sniper activity persisted in urban environments. The improvised armor provided continued deflection against direct rifle and machine gun fire. Supply lines extended across long distances from depots to the front. The Jeep moved between battalion and forward elements, delivering radio batteries, mortar shells, and rations. The corporal emphasized route variation to avoid predictable exposure. The armor allowed continued operations during sporadic shelling from isolated German artillery pieces still active in the area. Enemy anti-tank guns became less frequent, but Panzerfaust teams continued to appear at close range from concealed basements and windows. The corporal ensured the Jeep never advanced without infantry support, limiting exposure to short-range weapons. When traveling through narrow streets, the vehicle maintained minimal silhouette and used damaged armor plates as additional cover. The corporal routinely evaluated armor performance. The irregular placement of steel plate produced areas of increased durability based on cumulative reinforcement. Fragments embedded across the exterior indicated previous high-velocity impacts mitigated by layered structure. Sandbags hardened by rain and mud added minor blast absorption. During operations near Dortmund, the Jeep accompanied a command group, establishing a forward coordination point. German defenders fired 7.92 mm rounds from elevated positions. The armor prevented penetration to the radio equipment inside. The corporal directed relocation of the vehicle to a position behind a partially collapsed wall to allow uninterrupted transmission. In another incident, a German high-explosive round detonated nearby while the Jeep was stationary. The blast scattered debris that impacted the side armor. Weld seams held under stress despite visible deformation. The crew repaired structural damage using a hammer and additional weld beads applied by maintenance personnel at a field workshop. The unit encountered increasingly frequent surrenders of German personnel. However, isolated pockets continued delaying actions. Anti-tank rifles, although largely obsolete, reappeared in the hands of Volkssturm forces. A 7.92 mm projectile from such a weapon struck the armor on the passenger door. Penetration was prevented due to multiple overlapping plates salvaged earlier in the campaign. Advancing deeper into Germany, the corporal's Jeep assisted with reconnaissance tasks. It delivered messages and maps to squads scouting beyond reliable radio reach. While not designed as a reconnaissance asset, its mobility and armor allowed safe entry into areas where hostile fire was probable. Night operations required strict adherence to blackout protocols. The corporal ordered supplemental blackout shields welded over lights to reduce visibility to enemy observers. This adjustment limited illumination and improved survivability under conditions where German defensive fire remained unpredictable. American forces continued to advance toward the Elbe River. German units east of the river often lacked communication and ammunition, but remained dangerous. German machine gun nests in industrial zones used enfilade fire along roadways. The Jeep remained behind main assault formations, yet still encountered fire while supporting resupply movements. Engine performance worsened as the campaign continued. Added weight stressed the suspension and drivetrain. Field maintenance included tightening bolts, reinforcing brackets, and replacing shock absorbers where possible. Despite depletion of spare parts, the corporal kept the Jeep operational due to its critical communications role. The vehicle's exterior displayed multiple layers of battlefield history, with dented armor surfaces marked by impacts from K-40 rounds, mortar fragments, and concentrated rifle fire. Welded patches identified repeated improvements and rapid structural recovery after damage. As U.S. divisions reached the Elbe, orders restricted further eastward movement to avoid accidental engagements with advancing Soviet forces. The Jeep contributed to establishing coordination between units consolidating defensive lines. The armor, though visibly worn, still protected critical systems. With large-scale German resistance diminishing, the corporal's crew performed humanitarian duties. The Jeep transported medical supplies to civilian hospitals damaged by artillery. Armor protection ensured safe entry into areas where occasional sniper fire continued. Evacuation of displaced persons and wounded POWs became a recurring task, reflecting shift from high-intensity combat to stabilization operations. Following the official surrender of German forces in May 1945, American units initiated occupation duties. The improvised armored Jeep continued service in a reduced operational capacity, moving between administrative points and logistical locations. The armor remained installed due to uncertainty regarding remaining hostilities and the presence of insurgent activity in isolated areas. The corporal submitted informal reports describing armor effectiveness, highlighting the value of adaptive field modifications. Evaluations included specific data, numbers of impacts sustained, penetration effects, and performance variations across armor types and thicknesses. These accounts contributed to small-scale doctrinal consideration regarding survivability of lightly armored vehicles. The Jeep remained with the division as forces rotated into security and peacekeeping missions. Excess armor weight gradually caused further mechanical deterioration. The vehicle continued to operate in limited-range roles until maintenance resources shifted focus toward demobilization and equipment drawdown. During post-war inspection of the vehicle, maintenance officers documented the layers of armor and noted the extensive history of repairs and structural reinforcement. Observers recognized the level of initiative shown by the corporal in sustaining vehicle functionality across prolonged combat. The corporal and his crew retained no special recognition beyond informal acknowledgement within the battalion. The Jeep was eventually removed from frontline service. Armor plates were stripped for scrap. The vehicle itself was returned to standard depot condition, or designated for salvage depending on mechanical viability. Although many frontline soldiers improvised armor in Europe, few vehicles sustained repeated direct anti-tank engagements and remained operational throughout multiple major campaigns. The Corporal's Jeep demonstrated the ability of soldiers to adapt equipment in response to threats that exceeded original design parameters. The case provided insight into survivability of non-standard armor when subjected to cumulative battlefield stress. Statistical analysis during the campaign suggested that improvised armor reduced fatalities in vehicles engaged by splinters and small-caliber fire, though remained insufficient against full-caliber anti-tank weapons at close range. The Corporal's initiative aligned with historical patterns where soldier-level innovation influenced tactical outcomes. Adaptations of transport vehicles enhanced communication reliability and sustained maneuverability for infantry units dependent on unarmored mobility platforms. Without these modifications, communication failures may have increased vulnerability and reduced operational tempo. As the U.S. Army evaluated its future mechanized doctrine after the war, emphasis expanded on integrated armored protection for vehicles supporting infantry and reconnaissance missions. The development of post-war vehicles incorporated lessons from European combat, including increased armor protection for light utility vehicles and personnel carriers. Surveys conducted after hostilities recorded first-hand accounts of how such improvised protection directly affected casualty survival rates. The Corporal's records, though limited in formal distribution, mirrored broader feedback from frontline personnel. These experiences informed later decisions to equip light vehicles with armor kits during conflicts in Korea, Vietnam, and beyond. The Jeep itself, though no longer existing in modified form, became a representation of adaptive response to battlefield necessity. Its service history across France, Belgium, and Germany demonstrated the evolving nature of threats and the continuous requirement for innovation under fire. The Corporal concluded his deployment without major injury. The armor modifications he initiated contributed to continued mission capability throughout his service. His actions provided evidence that even minimalistic enhancements could influence combat outcomes significantly. In official battalion summaries, no substantial emphasis was placed on the armored Jeep beyond noting its utility during communications operations. However, soldiers within the unit recognized the practical advantages gained from the Corporal's modifications. The Jeep became a small but distinct example of survivability, achieved through ingenuity and perseverance. The lessons derived from the armored Jeep reinforced the necessity of balancing mobility and protection in support vehicles. Rapid, unarmored platforms remained essential for infantry maneuver, but battlefield realities elevated the importance of protection measures adjustable to tactical conditions. Operational evaluations concluded that improvised armor was a successful countermeasure against common battlefield hazards, including fragmentation and small arms fire. However, personnel acknowledged continued vulnerability to high-velocity armor-piercing weapons. The armored Jeep's survival against direct anti-tank fire represented an exception attributed to reduced penetration after improvised energy absorption, rather than guaranteed design resilience. The case reinforced the unpredictable nature of battlefield engagements and validated the value of adaptive protection measures. The Corporal's efforts exemplified local solutions in situations where external support or specialized equipment remained unavailable. The conflict in Europe ended with the Jeep still operational despite accumulated damage. The vehicle underwent final depot review before being removed from frontline inventory. Armor plating was dismantled to return the frame to standard specification or prepare components for recycling. The account of the armored Jeep remained largely confined to the Corporal's unit and its internal records. The surviving documentation included armor log entries, incident reports, and photographs taken by soldiers displaying the vehicle's exterior condition after repeated engagements. While not widely commemorated, the Corporal's Armor Initiative represented a significant example of improvisation in modern mechanized warfare. The armored Jeep demonstrated practical benefits to crew protection and mission survivability through direct field innovation. The experience contributed to broader recognition of the importance of crew-initiated vehicle fortification. Army leadership later incorporated modular armor designs into future development programs, derived from observations of European combat and similar field modifications elsewhere. Though the corporal returned home without widespread attention, the armored jeep's record documented measurable endurance against high-velocity impacts. The surviving evidence supported understanding of protective layering performance, encouraging continued study into energy absorption and field-expedient vehicle fortification. In the immediate post-war months, evaluations of frontline equipment usage provided insight into adaptation under combat conditions. Command elements interviewed personnel regarding operational challenges involving lightly protected vehicles. The corporal participated in discussions focusing on improvised armor's contribution to survivability. Reports highlighted recurring vulnerability in vehicles tasked with communication and supply duties. Light transports such as the Jeep were originally designed for mobility rather than protection, yet battlefield requirements exposed them to hostile fire, despite doctrinal guidelines restricting exposure. The corporal's experience demonstrated that protective augmentation supported mission continuity under persistent threat. Engineers examined remaining segments of improvised armor removed from the Jeep. Metallurgical analysis showed varied plate composition originating from both American and German sources. Differences in hardness and thickness influenced resistance during engagements. The armor exhibited deformation patterns, illustrating how successive strikes dispersed kinetic energy and reduced penetration depth. The corporal's records allowed tracing of distinct structural improvements correlated with increasing armor layering. Early engagements resulted in partial penetrations that caused fragment injuries, while later impacts failed to penetrate entirely due to cumulative reinforcement. Observers concluded that continuous improvements enhanced durability and structural integrity during prolonged operations. After-action findings acknowledged logistical concerns. Additional armor increased fuel consumption and degraded mechanical reliability. However, assessments noted that survivability outweighed drawbacks in critical operational roles. Analysts concluded that improvised designs offered temporary solutions when standard upgrades were unavailable. Historical context recognized that soldier-driven innovation remained consistent across mechanized conflicts. Lessons from the corporal's Jeep inform future procurement discussions, emphasizing modular protection for light transport vehicles. Similar patterns emerged across divisions where crews adapted equipment in response to evolving threats. Upon demobilization, the corporal returned to civilian life. His initiative was not formally recognized in official commendations, but unit personnel acknowledged the value of his decisions in sustaining communication continuity. The Jeep became an informal symbol of adaptation among soldiers who witnessed the protective benefits firsthand. The armored vehicle demonstrated survival against multiple anti-tank rounds and fragmentation hits that destroyed other unmodified platforms. Photographs taken near the end of the campaign documented the exterior condition, including visible dents, cracks, and layered weld seams that indicated repeated battlefield exposure. Improvised armor emerged as a widespread practice across Europe. Soldiers installed sandbags, welded scrap steel, and secured fuel cans filled with sand to reduce vulnerability. Commanders often tolerated modifications after witnessing protection against artillery splinters and small arms fire. The corporal's approach represented one of the more extensive applications of improvised protective layering on a communications vehicle. Anti-tank threats faced in Europe included the PK-40 gun, Panzerfaust, and Panzerschreck launchers, and tank main guns from Panther and Panzer IV units. Light vehicles rarely survived direct hits from these weapons. Partial penetrations encountered by the corporal's Jeep represented incidents where additional resistance reduced projectile energy enough to prevent fatal injuries. Terrain influenced engagement outcomes. Dense forests and urban rubble restricted angles of fire, reducing projectile velocity before impact. Hedgerows and ditches provided partial masking that contributed to survivability when combined with armored reinforcement. Environmental factors allowed improvised protection to counter threats more effectively than expected for a light platform. Crew discipline contributed significantly to survivability. The corporal enforced low-exposure posture, unpredictable driving routes, and rapid response to armor damage. Maintenance schedules increased to counter strain on the suspension and engine. These measures sustained mobility despite the added weight. Reliable communication influenced tactical outcomes throughout the campaign. Units without sustained communication faced delayed reinforcements and greater risk of isolation. The armored Jeep ensured uninterrupted artillery adjustment and message relay in environments where unarmored vehicles would have been disabled. Light vehicle vulnerability remained a recognized issue throughout operations in Europe. Similar losses across multiple units highlighted the risk faced by support vehicles operating near the front. The Corporal's Jeep demonstrated that improvised measures could mitigate some of these risks when rapid armor upgrades were unavailable. Post-combat evaluations conducted by Ordnance personnel indicated that layered plate combined with spacing and sandbags provided limited deflection and energy absorption. These findings contributed to later design considerations for light armored vehicles. The Jeep's endurance under repeated battlefield impacts supported continued study of hybrid protection systems. Subsequent conflicts validated similar adaptation strategies. In Korea, modified Jeeps supported convoy escorts. In Vietnam, heavily armored gun trucks emerged along supply routes. In Iraq and Afghanistan, improvised explosive device threats prompted widespread armor upgrades. The Corporal's actions reflected early application of protective measures that became standard in later decades. The armored Jeep remained a practical demonstration of frontline adaptation, where official resources were insufficient. While largely unrecognized beyond the unit, the vehicle served as evidence that effective protective enhancement could originate at the soldier level. Its continued operation across consecutive campaigns illustrated the durability of improvised engineering when continuously refined. The Jeep underwent final depot review after the war. Armor plating was removed and repurposed. The vehicle frame was either restored to standard condition or assigned for salvage depending on its mechanical state. The legacy of the modifications persisted only through records, photographs, and crew accounts, documenting its survival against anti-tank engagements. Although not widely acknowledged historically, the Corporal's initiative provided tangible benefits in combat. His decisions preserved communication capability under hostile conditions and reduced casualties within his immediate team. The experience represented a practical example of how adaptive measures influenced battlefield outcomes and supported the broader success of advanced infantry operations inside Germany. German resistance continued in isolated pockets during the final days of the war. The Corporal's Jeep still operated near frontline positions where scattered anti-tank weapons remained a threat. Communication support remained essential during the last coordinated offensives into central Germany. The improvised armor, though heavily damaged, continued to provide functional protection for radio equipment and crew members. In one of the final operational movements, the Jeep transported forward observers into a partially secured industrial area where German defenders used sniper fire and delayed demolition charges. The armor absorbed multiple small-caliber strikes directed toward the radio compartment. The crew remained unharmed and established a communication link that allowed Allied artillery to neutralize remaining threats. As German forces surrendered in increasing numbers, the frequency of direct combat engagements decreased. The Corporal prioritized repairs needed to sustain mobility. The engine exhibited signs of severe wear due to the additional load placed upon it throughout months of combat. Despite mechanical degradation, the vehicle remained operational until hostilities formally ceased. Following cessation of combat operations, the Jeep participated in logistical duties required for stabilization and occupation. The improvised armor continued to serve a role as long as scattered hostile actions occurred. The Corporal used the vehicle to transport essential goods into areas experiencing civil disruption and to assist medical efforts when conventional transportation assets were unavailable. During equipment demobilization, the Corporal submitted his notes to unit archives, detailing every instance of hostile fire interaction with the vehicle. The record portrayed a pattern of continuous threat adaptation. It included diagrams of armor layering, descriptions of metal sources, approximate impact angles, and the effect of energy transfer during penetrations and partial penetrations. Maintenance records further demonstrated the mechanical consequences of prolonged overload conditions. Technical personnel examined the Jeep before removal of armor. They documented weld seams and methods of attachment, acknowledging effective integration achieved under field conditions with limited equipment. The evaluation confirmed that improvisation significantly enhanced survivability without compromising essential mission capability. Although improvised armor did not render the Jeep immune to anti-tank weapons, it provided measurable protection against many battlefield risks encountered by infantry support vehicles. The Corporal's actions reflected the essential role of decentralized decision-making under combat pressure and illustrated how even minimal enhancements could influence survivability. After the war, the corporal separated from military service. His actions did not result in official commendations or formal studies bearing his name. However, unit personnel familiar with the Jeep service recognized its significance as an example of direct adaptation to enemy capabilities. The armored vehicle was referenced informally in after-action discussions about vehicle survivability. Historians studying vehicle protection measures in World War II occasionally cited improvised armor as a response to unexpected battlefield conditions. The armored jeep used by the corporal demonstrated that survivability improvements could be implemented without delaying operations or demanding extensive logistical support. The case contributed to an understanding of the relationship between mobility and protection in mechanized warfare. Lessons derived from this and similar experiences influence post-war vehicle doctrine. Light utility transports in later decades incorporated modular armor kits, reinforced panels, and enhanced crew protection systems. Tactical flexibility increased as combat planners recognized that light vehicles required scalable protection to remain effective near active hostile positions. The armored jeep served throughout multiple campaigns, endured repeated direct and indirect fire events, and contributed to communications continuity under hazardous conditions. Its performance validated the importance of field-level ingenuity in sustaining operational effectiveness. The corporal contributed to a broader legacy of frontline adaptation that shaped future advances in military vehicle design and protection. As the war concluded, the Jeep's layered armor stood as evidence of accumulated survival incidents and battlefield evolution. The many dents and impact marks represented encounters that could have resulted in severe casualties had modifications not been implemented. The corporal regarded the armor as a necessary improvement created from available materials rather than a distinction of personal innovation. The armored Jeep service concluded quietly without ceremony, yet its operational history reflected durability, resilience, and the effectiveness of improvisation in modern warfare. It demonstrated that survival against repeated anti-tank engagements, while statistically unlikely for a vehicle of its design, could occur when adaptive solutions were applied consistently over time. Long after the war ended, records preserved within archival collections provided evidence that the corporal's decisions directly contributed to missions carried out under continuous threat. The armored jeep remained a practical example of how individuals in combat addressed deficiencies rapidly and effectively. Its existence affirmed that innovation on the battlefield frequently originated from necessity rather than design. The corporal transitioned back into civilian life without the jeep that had served alongside him throughout the European campaign. The vehicle's armor was removed, and the machine either scrapped or reassigned according to military logistics protocols. The contributions it made existed primarily in the memories of its crew and the documents they submitted before their assignments ended. The history of the armored jeep illustrated how even modest actions by individual soldiers influenced broader outcomes in mechanized warfare. Its performance under fire reinforced the principle that survival enhancements, no matter how improvised in origin, could help maintain operational capability. The corporal's field modifications represented a small but clear example of adaptability contributing to mission success. The armored jeep that traveled through France, Belgium, and Germany provided a functional demonstration that innovation and persistence could offset design limitations. Its legacy was defined by continued service despite threats designed to eliminate vehicles of its type. The corporal's work equipment demonstrated that protective measures developed under pressure became essential components of battlefield endurance. Although the corporal's name did not appear in published histories, his actions contributed to practical knowledge applied in later conflicts. The armored jeep remained part of a broader story explaining how soldiers addressed evolving threats using available resources. It stood as an instance in which survival resulted from decisive action rather than engineering specification. The accumulated dents, welds, and repaired fractures represented physical proof of the value provided by adaptive armor in combat. Even without formal recognition, the armored jeep's continued operation through the end of the European War symbolized the effectiveness of improvised protective solutions and affirmed the necessity of adaptability on the modern battlefield. The Corporal's decisions lengthened the operational life of a vehicle initially intended to avoid combat exposure, transforming it into an asset that endured environments for which it had not been designed. The vehicle's existence chronicled innovation, resilience, and survivability. Through consistent adaptation, the Jeep carried out missions supporting the success of forces advancing into Germany. Its story demonstrated how battlefield ingenuity played a direct role in shaping outcomes in mechanized infantry operations during World War II.